So I am sitting here with Macha Nightmare. And Macha, you were just telling me about your name. What is your full name?
Well, it's kind of embarrassing and ridiculous, but and it was given to me by several people together. And it's Mighty Mock of the Nightmare, which is why I reduced it to M. I thought it was a little bit much. I just go by Mock, and I even leave the M off these days.
So at what point in your life did you get that name? Was it fairly early on?
Yes, I not early on in life, but early on in witchiness. Um, I was in a coven that was a arose from a class that Starhawk and Amber Khan, I think, did, or Lauren Liebling, one or the other. These tangled together, reclaiming and this the answer to this question. So for some years, I in 1975, I went to a talk at a local bookstore, local metaphysical store, um, about the goddess, and I went with my friend Anna and Anna Mystic, and there were only three people who went to it, but the speaker was Starhawk. It was 1975. She hadn't written the Spiral Dance. And by the way, there's a little black bar across the top of this. I don't know if it's going to show on yours because I
No, it
can't see
doesn't to me.
because I don't see
No.
my face. Um, anyway, and I said, well, I'd really be interested, blah, blah, blah. So from time to time, they would have a Sabbath that was open and not open, but invitation. And the first one I went to was a Samhain of all places, a penthouse in the Marina District of San Francisco, which is not known for penthouses, but it was a penthouse. And it was put on by three covens. One was Compost, the famous Compost. One was Raving, and one was Honeysuckle. Honeysuckle was all women, and Raving was all women. Honeysuckle was dying at that point, and Raving was sort of taking it on. And I would go well, that was the first one I went to, but I would go to Sabbath rituals periodically when there was a Sabbath, and there were maybe five or six people that I would see at these that weren't part of the covens that were putting them on. And all of us were asking the same thing. We want to know more. And at the time, people were taking in coveners with a mentorship kind of model. There's one at a time, and there was a mentor, which I think is good. But they were not. Oh, the covens were not looking for more people. So, but we kept going, and we kind of got friendly. Some of us who had been going to these invitational Sabbaths, but all of us were saying the same thing. We want more. So Starhawk and Lauren Liebling taught a class at Julia Morgan Center in Berkeley called The Elements of Magic, a 6-week class. And the people in that class clamored for more. So they designed another class, which was the Pinnacle of Iron, and that was taught in San Francisco at the home of one of these people that would go to the invitational Sabbaths. And I said I wanted to go, but I hadn't taken the first class. She said, "Oh, you've been to enough Sabbaths that you can, it's okay." So I took that series, and we really bonded. It was pretty amazing, and we wanted more. At the same time as we were in the Pinnacle class, there was another elements class going, second one from the one that this came out of, and we wanted a third class. So they did a class called Rites of Passage. And some of the people from the first element, all the people from the Pinnacle class and some of the people from the second elements class joined with the third class, which was um, the Rites of Passage. And at the end of that, we just decided to stay together and form a coven. We were all women, and we did. And there were 9 of us.
Mm.
We were totally in love with each other. I mean, really, really swept away by the whole wonderfulness of it. There was a lot of intimacy. There was all our rituals were sky clad. There was lots of creativity. We were encouraged to speak as the Spirit moves us, which is what we did, as opposed to heavy scripted things. One of the people who's better known, who was in that coven, was Caradwin Falling Star.
Right.
And there were actually four people that I would say were the movers and shakers in that group. Caradwin was one. I was one. Sophia Sparks was one, and Bone Blossom was one. All really different kinds of people. I don't know if you've ever heard of Bone Blossom. She's gone.
Yes.
She was pretty. I wrote quite a bit about her when she passed. It's on my blog. Um, and Sophia, we were pretty tight for a long, long time. And there were ruptures at some point after I left the coven after 4 years. It
So
seemed like it stalled.
let me have stop and ask, did the coven have a name?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And we were, as I said, we were full of it. It was called the Holy Terrors.
So that's how you became Macha Nightmare?
Yeah, it was in that coven. They used to call me Mighty in that coven. The Macha came. It's actually kind of funny. We met at Sophia's house, and we had Beth was a weaver, Bone Blossom. She was a weaver, so she had this rug that was like we called a magic carpet. And when we did hands-on healing and stuff, we put people on that rug. And I came in one night kind of snarling, and people said, what's wrong? And then we started to talk about, we weren't in circle yet, whether people had thought of any names or were considering taking another name, or anyone gave them a name. And I just said, well, I feel like Macha tonight because I had been fighting with my husband. And they put me on that rug, on that magic carpet. And I was called Macha ever since. And then Sophia put the Mighty on, and I took the Nightmare. But they used to address me as Mighty, which was kind of embarrassing too. But it was in house, so it didn't matter. And here's another, this is a side story, but I think it's worth telling. Sam Webster's late wife, Tara,
Mhm.
was in a coven in Atlanta. They had heard of us. They called their coven, sort of as an homage, the Death Crones. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they have a series of cartoons. They're hilarious, and they are online. You can find them online if you look for the Death Crones.
Okay.
Really, but it was very feminist. The Death Crones go to the museum. Death Crones go to a festival. It's really funny. Anyway, she said we got inspired to call ourselves Death Crone from when we heard about the Holy Terrors. So I thought that was kind of cool. So we met for about 4 years, and it seemed to stall, and there was no rupture or anything. It just seemed like it was less energized. And I decided to leave. So when I left, I did a ritual with everybody, and I addressed every single person individually before I left. And it wasn't too long after that that the whole thing kind of dissolved, I guess. I wasn't really in it, but I know it didn't last. And some of the people in it had um, differences of opinion. Like one of the people thought that the other person's daughter was being molested, and the person couldn't hear that. I don't think she was actually. And I was close to all of them, but there was something wrong, but it wasn't, I don't think that was molesting. But it was during that time when everything was everything was incest. It was the big thing.
Right.
It was like the Satanic Panic, like it was, child sexual abuse. And she was convinced. There was a group called Parents United that met, and the person who suspected it got the other person who didn't believe it to go to these Parents United meetings. Anyway, they had a big falling out in the long run. A very, very sad, because they were living in the same house. And I stayed friends with all of them. Uh, Not real tight, but I never had any rupture with any of them. And I kind of bridged some things because I used to go to see Sophia a lot when she moved to Oregon, but she cut me off for some reason. I don't know why. She never said. She just blocked me.
Mm.
And it was like a couple nights after I had been at her house. I had no idea what it was about. And I thought it was kind of chicken shit because I thought she should have told me. I mean, to cut me off is one thing, but tell me why. But she
That
didn't.
was that was your first coven. Have And so the question that we sort of started with was, about Covenant of the Goddess. And
Yeah,
COG was created as an organization for covens. So
right.
how long after that did COG get started?
Cox started in 1975.
Right.
The Holy Terrors was roaring in 1981.
Oh
And
yeah.
we went to a COG meeting and joined. And I joined in 81.
Okay.
And I got credentials, elder credentials, because the standard in those days was the high priest or high priestess of your coven would say whether you were entitled to, if you're qualified to get the creds. And we said we are a deep priestesshood and we're all equal. And they all said yes. So I wasn't the only one. I think some other people did too. And I've held the title ever since and renewed it every year, but I've never, ever, ever been asked for it. Not in schools I've taught, not for weddings, not for nothing. I think it's kind of funny. When I go to prisons, I never was asked for creds, but um, but it's kind of fun to have anyway. So at some point in those early years, I wanted to be initiated. It felt to me like I wanted to feel a sense of belonging and also a carrier of an ancient heritage. We didn't really know what it was. We were learning, but I mean, we were still thinking there was 9 million women burned back in those days. Anyway, but I asked for initiation, and I had a sponsor. Carradine was my sponsor, and
What was the tradition you asked to be initiated in?
well, we didn't really think much about trads.
Mm.
Theoretically, I think it was fairy,
Ah, okay.
but we didn't think about trads in this. We didn't. I mean, some people talked about it, but we were just witches. You're just a witch or you're not. So the people who initiated me were mostly Coven Raven people, with the exception of Carradine. And they were whatever they were that Starhawk gave them. I consider its predecessor, which the predecessor to Raving was Compost, which Valerie Walker kept alive for all her life until she passed. And Compost, I do have some really good interviews with some old Compost people I'm still in touch with. And I consider that the incubator for what evolved into reclaiming. So reclaiming was just a teaching collective, and we did.
So I want to stop because I'd like us to do reclaiming at another time if we can.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're really kind of concentrating on COG. And so I said, how did you join COG? And you said you joined with the Holy Terrors, and then you got an initiation. And then were you still in the Holy Terrors at that time?
The Holy Terrors, yes, I was the first reclaiming initiation. There wasn't any reclaiming tradition.
Right.
As you said, that what tradition? I was the first one who asked for it from this series of classes.
Okay.
But
So
it
basically, it was
hadn't
like a
evolved
reclaiming
into what
initiation.
could be identified as a trad at that point.
Okay.
So then there were more. There's more to that story. But around that time it was all happening. We went to COG meeting, joined COG. That was it. And I was pretty active. And I started to go to we the very first Merrymeet was also in 1981. They
Hmm.
had grand councils, which were camp out things because some of the people were from Southern California, or like Georgians were from Bakersfield and stuff. They would have, because the state mandated that you have an annual meeting.
Right.
So that's what it was a grand council, what they call grand council. And we had all kinds of cool titles for the officers, like summoner and stuff like that, and purse warden. We
Mhm.
didn't have like regular treasurer, newsletter editor. And but I liked it. And so they had decided the people in the Northern California was were pretty active. I think Diane Baker was the first officer at that time during that year. And they decided to have a festival along with it because we didn't have much in the way of festivals in the West Coast that I
Mm.
knew of. And so we decided to combine Grand Council with the festival that was called Merrymeet. So that was the first Merrymeet. And it was a place called Rodeo Beach in Marin County, California. And we slept in, there were old army barracks and with these metal bunks, with wire. And that's what we slept in, with our sleeping bags and this funky old um, barrack. But we had an art exhibit and stuff like that. And that was the first, and one of the people who was really rah rah, as you I'm sure know from memory, is Allison Harlow,
Yeah.
who was fairy. And Allison had gone to other festivals around the country and was close friends with Margot Adler. They went to the same grade school in New York City. Not at the same time. Allison was a lot older, but little grade school, a little hippie grade school in Twinich Village. But that's what I think they originally bonded over. But they were close. Margot mentions Allison a lot in Drawing Down the Moon. So Allison had gone to these other festivals, and she invited several people from these other festivals. Among them, Judy Harrow. That's where I met Judy Harrow. Ginny Brubaker, Dave Norman, Finn, and a couple of other people from Salt Lake City. That's when I met all of them, and um, and I was just dazzled. I mean, I was really really excited. Oberon and he wasn't Oberon. He was Otter. Zell and Morning Glory were there. They had a coven that was a member, but they were called Home, Holy Order of Mother Earth, which I also thought was a super cool name. And we did rituals on the beach, and I remember one chant in particular that went on for quite a while, thanks to Morning Glory. Decomposing, recomposing, decomposing, recomposing, decomposing, recomposing. Anyway, that we did that for a long time. I forget what inspired it. But anyway, that's where I met all those people. And when it was over, there was new first officers. Co-first officers were Ginny Brubaker and Dave Norman in Chicago. Chicago also had a thriving Wiccan community there. I like to use the term Wiccan, Witchen, because it included not all Wiccan. They had a thriving Wiccan community in Chicago, as you probably know, and as Margot talks about in Drawing Down the Moon. So it spread from there. So the next Merrymeet was at Circle Pines in Michigan, which was really different for us, and I went to it. And I loved it. I mean, God, I got to meet witches from all over the country. And one of the people who I think was conducting the meetings was Amber Kay. I remember we had one of those tarp things, the shade things. It was out in the sun, it was sticky, it's humid. And I remember we were sitting there with a wheelbarrow full of ears of corn while Grand Council was being conducted, and we were shucking the corn for dinner that night in the meeting, which I thought was very cool. And I went to sort of not exactly an orientation, but a kind of friendly get to know you session that Ginny Brubaker did. And she taught this chant, which I have used ever since at the beginning of my chant workshops. Turns out it's a Sufi inspired. She learned it because she was a neuro NLP person, neuro linguistic programming. She learned it at some event she went to in Marin County, California, which is where I am sitting right now. And she took it to Chicago and used it. And then she took it to Michigan, and I learned it from her in Michigan. And I took it back to California. I've been using it all over the country ever since. So that's another little interesting tidbit. Another thing that happened at that
Are you
first,
going to give us the chant?
oh, you want to hear?
Yes.
It has gestures and it has movement. It's a heart thing. But if you don't know anybody, it's kind of a forced intimacy, what I call forced intimacy. I open my eyes to you. I open my heart to you. Together we raise our heart to the sun. Then we turn around. And together we are opening our loving hearts as one. I open my eyes to you. I open my heart to you. And then when together we raise, you touch your hands with the other person. Together we raise our hearts to the sun. And then you rotate. And together we are opening our loving hearts as one. And then you turn around and do it with the next person. So you do it all around the circle. It sometimes gets messed up, but you make sure you get everybody to do it with everybody else. Anyway, that's the chant. And I learned it from Jenny Brubaker in Michigan. The other thing that happened to me, that was such an eventful, for me, an eventful event. There were two young men strolling around, just kind of looking at stuff. And I was strolling around kind of, it was in between sessions. We were just sort of wandering around in the grass. And these two men and they introduced themselves to me and they said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Macha." And there were two men, one was skinny and one was fat. And they were Stephen Posh and Sparky Rabbit. And Sparky said, "What's your name?" I said, "Macha." And he said, "Oh, are you Macha Nightmare?" Which totally blew my mind. I had no idea anybody knew anything about that, but he had been reading their claiming newsletter and whatnot. And yeah, we didn't have Witch Camps even at that time, but we became close. Both of us, all three of us, were close friends from then on. Steven's the one I was hoping you would meet at Big on
Yeah, yeah.
another time.
So that was
But
82.
and that was 82, yeah. And Sparky's gone now, but he left
Yeah.
a wonderful legacy, and you can find all that music online. Two albums, one called Lunacy and one called Hand of Desire. And they're linked on my website, machanightmare.com/lunacy. Um, because when he died, they were not in any, they had originally been issued in cassettes, and they were like passe cassettes, and now they're digitized. Anyway, that's an aside. Um, that was a really important time for me. Like the first, I met Judy Harrow in 81 and Ginny and those guys. So I stayed with COG ever since. And I think with a year or so later, I stood for a newsletter. I was a newsletter editor. And then in 97, 8, I,
Wait, wait, wait. Before that, if you're going all the way to 97, you and I met in 1990, 1990.
we did
Because
in Washington, in Vashon
yeah,
High.
because I was second officer. I had I
Right,
went and visited and we had a local council, Northwest Local Council.
right,
So I stood for second officer and it was and I was elected with Althea Whitebirch. And so
right.
we had Merrymeet, Merrymeet 1990, Building Pagan Culture, and you came up for it and
I
you
did.
stood for first officer and I stood for first officer. That's how we met.
Oh, I forgot that. Yeah. That was
Yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
Vashon Island at a Girl Scout camp.
Yeah.
It's these very kind of smelly, moldy cabins.
Yeah.
But
And you were
Andres
so
and Deirdre were
nice.
there, huh?
You were so nice to me, and you were like, I didn't know anybody, I didn't know that many people, and you were so nice to me. You had, we'd stood against each other, and then you went, oh, now I would like to, talk to you, and we've had a friendship ever since, and that really impressed me that, you didn't have any hard feelings that I won. You're like,
Thank
nope,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. And that was the first time we had a coffee vendor. You guys, that one from Ravens of Ravenna. You had a coffee vendor, and it was completely changed the tone of the meetings. There's, they were mellower before that, but people were jacked up. There's also what I remember, two other memories from that time. One is James Gagney's cantata for Beltane was performed. I think it was the first
Oh,
time.
right. Yeah.
It wasn't Beltane, and it was kind of a sort of a formal piece of music for Beltane when you consider that it's sort of riotous and all no holds barred, but it was lovely. And I actually still had the program, and not some years ago on Facebook, he never had any, and I sent him a PDF of the program because I, for whatever reason, didn't throw it away because I didn't like that. But the other thing that happened is there were terrible wildfires going on somewhere, I forget where, but we were in a rainforest, as you know, in Vashon Island is a rainforest, and Anders and Deirdre were there, and I was hanging around a lot with a woman called Lady of the Wild Things, Carol Banner, and she was one of the original people in COG, original signatory of the incorporation papers. She passed away now too, but her name, her witchy name was Lady of the Wild Things, and we were pretty chummy. We decided, I thought, that trees communicated with each other, and if we gave a message to these trees in this forest, it would be conveyed eventually in support of these trees that were trying to resist this forest fire. It was it? I think it was in the United States. It might have been the Amazon. Anyway, we decided. So we did a ritual in the forest. Uh, Andres drummed. We had a chant that I can't remember, but I learned it from Deirdre Arthen, and we did this ritual with and to the trees to show our support. And that was at Vashon Island too.
So when the coven dissolved, did you then become a solitary as a COG member?
As a COG member, God, I don't know. I
Because
was in an I was in another coven pretty much after that. We
okay.
formed a couple of them in that interim. They never had that spark that her Holy Terrors had. They would, last a couple of years. They were they were all women covens. And one was called Traveling Light. That was around for, and we were members of COG. And then the other one's called Nisuk that I never knew. We wanted a cool, like, obscure name. And that happens to be a line from Summer is a coming in. You know that song?
Yeah.
Swick the Navarno. The Swick the Navarno. So nothing, you've never known anything sweeter, is
Uh,
basically what it means. Sweetest thing you've ever known. So we called ourselves Coven de Swick the Navarno, which I thought was nice and obscure because Covens had all these cool names, this dragon, this and whatnot. And but we did not last all that long. From that time on, I've been a teacher. Well, before that, I was a teacher, and I was one of the classes that I taught was in Palo Alto, California.
so I'm sorry, Maka. I was sort of hoping to keep to
I know,
COG. Yeah, yeah.
I know.
Is this a COG thing or
Well,
because we were on
they formed a coven called Stone Dancers, and they joined COG too.
excellent.
This coven that I trained, and I I don't know. I don't think I've been in a coven since then. I'm not a solitary. I mean,
Yeah, it's a
that was the
COG thing.
option, but
Right. That was the option.
my argument is, in my case, I'm a floater.
Okay.
I don't do much by myself. I like to work with other people,
Yeah.
and I work with different kinds of people whenever I have a chance. Sometimes I'm invited to Sabbaths or to not just Sabbaths, and sometimes not, but not as a member of that coven. Like I used to go to a lot of rituals with Trismegiston because
Mm.
they're friends, and they had a coven. And when they had outsiders there, like Don used to like to do, he still does, I think, likes to do rituals for his interfaith friends to show them what Wicca is all about. So those kind of things. So yeah, I'm a floater.
Yeah, and the reason we're talking about it for people who don't know is that COG has an organizational structure. You are a coven, or you can also join as what they call a solitary. You're not a member of a established coven that's a member of the covenant. So you, as a solitary, have carried our proxy to Grand Council. My coven is Coven of the Mystical Merkaba, and you were a representative for many years. So you've done a
Yep.
lot of stuff, and not just us, but a lot of people. You used to carry a
Yeah,
ton
I
of
did.
proxies.
Yeah, I did. I did. I mean, I'm just sort of a born networker. And speaking
It's
of early credentials, I looked at some of the early newsletters, and I think all of them are at Addison Research Library. They're not digitized yet. They should be. And I think probably all of them or most of them are at the Valdosta Library. But two things I found in one of the old newsletters, I found that they created the category of solitaries that for two people, basically. One was Sequoia, the late Sequoia, who was a dear friend. And if you want to know anything about Sequoia, who's a one of a kind, titstothewind.com. Tits to the Wind is the name of the blog spot. She used to say that when she'd get on her bike. She was a biker. Tits to the Wind. So Sequoia was one, and the other one was Sharon Devlin, who is also a close friend. She lives in Illinois now. But I found, I don't know where I found it, but I have it in my computer and I could bring it on screen if I looked for it. One of the original um, credentials, hand lettered calligraphy credentials signed by Alan Moonblood, Lord Alan Moonblood, who is Nerude person, and it's Sequoias. And I've sent it to the history group and I've sent it to the website thinking it would be a cool thing to put on the website, but it's never made it there. Anyway, I still have it.
oh,
And I don't
cool.
know how I even came upon it. Maybe after she died, I don't remember.
Well, you had
So
been starting to talk about what happened in the 90s, and I said, let's talk about, Merrymeet 1990. But then you said in the mid 90s, you started holding like more offices.
I didn't hold another office until 97, 8. I ran for first at the time we published the Pagan Book of Living and Dying.
Oh,
And I pretty much walked right into that. And COG was still thriving at that time. It's not, it has one expects any organization or any individual for that matter to go through some waves when they're really thriving and really productive and really putting a lot out, and times when they're more reflective or calmer and resting or reflecting. So I'd expect that anyway. Also, another early COG meeting I went to was in, I think it was Rowe Conference Center. It was in Massachusetts. And there is where I met Andres and Deirdre, and I met John Uhallam. Judy, of course, was there. Eva was there. Diana Paxson was there. I remember at one meeting, the Lady Phoenix from Texas. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, Lady.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, there was a local council apparently. I wasn't that active that I was paying attention to every new local council, but there was a local council in Texas called Lone Star, which I thought was a great name for a
Yeah.
local council in Texas. And they had something in their community that was disruptive and they were bad feelings. And she aired a lot of them at this meeting. I had never, I was like, rolling my eyes. I just still felt like a baby witch. And that they had a Follies there. It had what they called a tea dance. And I remember John was all dressed up in his leathers and stuff. John, Bright Shadow, Johnny Hall. And Tiller was there. Tiller and Hiragano. They were at all of these early ones too, as I recall. And they had not a talent show, but like a little show where the people would come up and sing their songs or whatever they did. He was playing the guitar and singing a song, and somebody snapped a picture. Tiller. He got off that stage, ran up the aisle, and grabbed the camera from the person. And I'm going, whoa. Because again, young folks, we did not take pictures in those days. Everybody was in the broom closet.
Yeah.
So that was why and that's why we don't have pictures of those events for the most part. And that was after Gwydion died. Gwydion died, I think, 82. But I remember those three things: the tea dance and the camera scene, and uh, Andres and Deirdre and Lone Star Local Council. So there were a couple others in the East that I went to. I've gone to most of them, and at all of them, I have to say, talking about COG, at all of them, I have met wonderful people that have been lifelong friends, such as yourself. And that to me has been the gift of you learn other stuff, you exposed to other, like I said, Sparky and Stephen and I were friends forever, and not only us, but um, I always met cool people. And actually, I want to send some of them invitations to this Terramation talk. I'm still in touch with some of them, ones I was pretty friendly with. So when COG was a little bit shaky when I took over as first, and I kind of handpicked most of my board. From some of them were among people who had served on the board in years past but had become disillusioned.
Right.
So I got them back, illusioned them again. One was Jim Hogue. He was,
Right.
yeah, from Iowa, Lady the Prairies. And one was,
And his wife, Karen.
yeah, his wife, Karen. Ginny's wife, Ginny Brubaker's wife. Um, Dave Norman has passed also. Ginny Brubaker's wife is Gail Schieser. And Gail Schieser was also on my board. So that was nice. I mean, I felt good about that. The only problem with that, I'm all the way up to 97.
Yeah.
Great.
98, I think. There was Merrymeet because it
98.
was Las Vegas.
Outside of
And
Las Vegas, a place called the Prima Donna Inn.
it
Ironic.
was the most surreal
Were you
Merrymeet with,
there?
yeah, I was there.
It was
I
awful.
It was
It was
awful with the
awful.
ding 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 ding.
I know
I'm like,
you couldn't get
where are we?
anywhere.
Because they'll give you free meeting rooms. That was it.
We had the meeting rooms, we had food. The food was easy to get, and
Right.
we had the hotel rooms, but you couldn't go from one place to another without going through
Ding
that
ding 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 ding.
clamorous, yes. And I really felt that we have members who couldn't tolerate that.
Oh
They're
yeah.
much too sensitive for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I could, but not
It was
easily, and I
hard.
still was
And
rattled.
yeah.
But so the only when I this year before we were in Minnesota, and the I say divine presences. There were three veiled figures in gray, silent, who came into the initial meeting, the opening meeting. I walked around. I forget if they did anything, but it was one of Stephen's ideas.
Huh.
He was tired of the red, white, and black goddess stuff. So he had them all in gray, and they were all veiled. So I remember that. And also there was Thorne Thorne Merrill had been the newsletter editor that year. And there was a male coven in Minneapolis who applied for membership. I forget their name. Anyway, they wrote this statement of practice, which you have to write to join. And it was a little smartassy, but it was who they were, and it was sincere, I thought. And Thorne was the newsletter editor, and she changed some of the wording because she was offended by it. I just was furious. And when it came up in Grand Council, I made a stink about it. And I stood up for those guys. Um, so she wasn't too happy with me. But when it was over, we had all the offices except second. The
Hmm.
state mandates you have to have an annual meeting. No, no two ways about it. Only person who would take second was Thorne. And she would only take it if she could have it in a casino and if she could have it in Nevada.
I got it.
So I was screwed. And it was a terrible experience. Terrible. Um, for me personally. I know that Finn brought some friends from a coven in Salt Lake City, and I think they formed the Wasatch Local Council at that time. One of them was a harpist. They played in the hallways. the harps, which was nice. That was also in a casino. But and Galadriel was also new then because I met Galadriel in I think it was 93. We were in Malibu at a well, I should back up. One of the early Merrymeets was called Ancient Ways that was put on by Glenn Turner in concert with her Ancient Ways Festival. But Grand Council was there too. And by the way, Glenn Turner, right this very minute, is running for state comptroller, California.
I didn't know that. I wish her well. I wish her luck.
Um, anyway,
Thank goodness.
Glenn, yeah,
The
she's from a real
ancient
old
ways.
California pioneer family.
Oh, wow.
There's a county called Glenn County, one of our 52 counties. And that's her family name. That's how
So you're on an early Mary Meet Ancient Ways.
early
Is
Merrymeet
that
Ancient Ways. Yes, and
80s?
it was at Harbin Hot Springs
Right.
in California, Northern California, Middletown, California. And Sharon and Bone Blossom and I decided that, well, Sharon in particular, she was offended by how the goddess was portrayed in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which was big in us. I didn't even see it. Never even have seen, I don't think. But anyway, we decided to we were all really into the dark goddess.
Hmm.
So we created a ritual. We performed it in a triangle, not a circle, that was pointed towards the west. Under an oak tree was a full moon, was a fire in the center. There were three priestesses, one in white, one in red, and one in black. The one in white was Bone Blossom. And Bone Blossom did a trance induction kind of thing, to change people's state of consciousness. And we had a big kettle, like a witch's cauldron, that was full of bones that Bone had gotten from the butcher. Animal bones. And I passed them all around, and this it was heavy because it was hard on my back. I was lugging this kettle around, and people would reach in there and get a bone to hold while we were doing the rest of the ritual, which I thought was pretty cool little thing. So we did all that, and the next one to speak was me, and I did find this. I did find my written. I had written it ahead of time liturgy, the red one, and then the last one was the black. We were all collies. It was called Collie the Dark Mother and other Collie the, no Collie the Terrible Mother and other dark goddesses. And I have most of the script, at least the outline of it. I think I have Bones' words, I have my words. Didn't have Sharon's because they were extempore. So she was the one who ended it. And at the end, we had a guy named Paul who's also gone, who had a great big drum, like about this big. You can't see in that, but big. And Sean Folsom, who happened to have a thigh bone trumpet. Oh, and I should back up. Also, when we passed around the bones, and then she was doing the trance induction, we passed around a skull chalice. Yes, indeed. And what we had in it was pomegranate juice. Seems perfect for death, right? There were people who swear to this day that that was blood.
Yeah.
But they all had to take a sip of it as it was going around with the bones. So they got the bones and they got the sip from the cauldron. And then when it was over, at the end, it all ended with the drums and the thigh bone trumpet and cacophony. And we three were standing um, front to back, one in the front, next one behind her, and the next one behind her, close, and with our legs spread out, squatted, singing this Kali chant, this of like a puja, adoration. And everybody went through our legs to be reborn. It was hot. It was hot. It was legendary. And when it was done, well, because when that finally happened, we revealed ourselves. I don't remember if we were veiled or not, but when we revealed ourselves, That was when all the cacophony with the thigh bone trumpet and the big drum happened. And then, when at the conclusion, to bring them back, we again passed around the skull. But what was in it was milk and salt,
Hmm.
which is disgusting and will bring you back in your body real right quick if you sip it.
Okay.
So that's what this was before AIDS. People sipped. So that's how we ended it. Well, Carolyn had a past lives workshop later on that weekend, and she said, oh, people were really primed for it from that ritual. There was another coven there, Moonbirch Grove, which was a Diana coven with Ruth Barrett et al.
Right.
They blew up, and they said they were on the edge of it, but that ritual took them over the edge. So then people wanted us to repeat it. That was 85, I think. So then we had another Merrymeet later in at a place called Camp Swig in Saratoga, California, and people had wanted another um, performance of that ritual. And I would say, in the meantime, I met Margot Adler, and she said, "Are you the ones that did?" She heard about it. I said, "Yeah." She had heard about it, and then Sequoia was traveling in India.
Hmm.
And she wrote to me and she said, I heard you guys. She heard all about it from one of her correspondents who was there, Farida Fox. So it had spread. Word of it had spread. So they wanted us to do it again. You can't really do it the same. It's never the same twice. But
Ma'am.
if we did it for 97, we had a different altar builder, Sophia, and we had Bone and I did the same thing, but we didn't have Sharon because she wasn't living here then. And the dark goddess was Sequoia. And Sequoia had been to the Orient, and she brought back these Balinese masks, these rather with the fangs and stuff. She had a red one, a black one, and a white one, which we wear on the back of our heads, and we were
Right.
veiled. Our faces were veiled, and we wore them on the back of our heads. But basically, we did the same ritual, and Z was at that one too. I remember, and
Let's see Budapest.
yeah, Z Budapest. In fact, when I was getting dressed, where I was in the women's room at this campground, and there was no one there, and I needed some help tying something. I forget what it was, getting my outfit on. And this person was there, and I said, "Can you help me with this?" She was very gracious, and she helped me. Found out later it was Mary Greer, but I hadn't met her either until then. But so that's how I met Mary Greer. You meet people in the funniest ways, like you and I. Um, anyway, so we did the ritual again. It wasn't the same, but it was still pretty powerful. And we haven't done it since, but I did unearth the script recently and I will preserve it
Oh,
for
that's
later.
cool.
And of course, there were no pictures, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't take pictures
Right.
in those days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Would have been
So
cool.
you were first officer in 97, 98.
Hmm.
Um, have you held an office since then?
No,
But you are
I've only
currently
held
colonel.
two national offices. One was in the 80s. I was a newsletter editor.
Mhm.
And there's a nice little story about the newsletter that I was doing because we had to, this is before the internet, so it's the only way we could communicate with each other between grand councils. We were
Mhm.
spread all over this country. So we had eight, as you know, eight um, newsletters that were issued at every Sabbath, and they were old fashioned. They were on 8.5 by 14 paper, legal size paper on, two size, and you'd fold it and hand staple, and you'd put the, at least we had labels, put the labels on, like the stamp on. We had a nonprofit postal thing, whatever to save money. But
Yes.
I did the newsletter one time, and we were talking about, well, the newsletter has potential to be more than just a recap of notes from the various local council meetings because they're boring. Who the hell reads that, and who renewed their membership? I mean, they're boring. And also, a lot of people don't know how to take notes, so they take everything down, and then the wind came up and we got disturbed, come on. You just only need to do bullet points of what your decisions were. Period. That's all you need to, and it was there when it was. But I can't teach people how to do notes. I don't do them. So, so but a lot of them are much wordier than they need to be and more detailed and meaningless to other people who read them. But so I thought, well, we could have other stuff in the newsletter, like article and stuff now and then. I've still been campaigning for that, and I still send them articles now and then, but they end up at the back. No one reads them. And we decided to see because they were in-house and we wanted to make them so it could be more public. So I did an experiment with the newsletters saying that the secret stuff could be on one little page that you stick inside the middle. And in order to test that out, I had a centerfold, a nude centerfold in the COG newsletter. That was in the 80s. I don't know if you remember yet. I think it was before,
87.
maybe.
87 is when Covenant of Mystical
Yeah, I think
Macabre
this is
joined.
84.
Yeah.
So we had this nude centerfold. We had the Hag of Winter. It was Bone Blossom, which was in there loose, wasn't stapled in with the rest, just to see how it would do. I don't think anyone remembers that. I don't know if there's any copy of it around. I asked Donna, I'll have to go over to the library and see if I can find it in the old newsletters.
And that'd be fun.
I know it was a winter solstice newsletter. I thought it was a good idea. but, and I thought it was really interesting thing about COG, but nobody knows about it. I'm probably the only person who has any memory of it at all since Bone is gone.
Well, you were involved in the effort. COG is now 50 years old, and there are several committees that are meeting to figure out what COG is going to do for the next 50 years, or if the organization is going to change. And you are on the history committee. But I'm kind of interested in your perspective. So, do you think that, there is a purpose still for the covenant? It seems really different. We used to like represent witches and advocate for, we're an advocacy group, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside, apparently. So do you think COG has a purpose, and what do you see its future?
Well, I would like it to stay alive. After all, it's 50 years old and 51, and how many pagan groups can say that? Um, Even though it's been through its ups and downs, it had a different kind of value when it was newer, and it was apparently, I think the phrasing was to guarantee which clergy the same rights and privileges of any other kind of clergy. Well, I have since, in the intervening years, thought about that a lot more and been involved in it a lot more, and I don't like the word clergy.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a lot of that stuff is like parroting the overculture, and I don't think it's who really reflects who we are. Nevertheless, I do have an honorary MDiv, and I pull it out when I right circumstances are right. I think one of the things that COG has done for since the well, really since the 80s is interfaith work. We
Mm-hmm.
were a member of the Berkeley Area Interfaith Council when I first joined in 81. We were a member already. That was now it was local. It was Berkeley, California, so take that into consideration. But when the second parliament of the world, the anniversary of the parliament of the world's religions was being planned, and I think you gave a paper there in
I
93
did. Yep.
on pagan scholarship, was it?
Wiccan devotionals.
Wicked devotion. Oh. Um, anyway, it was Don had been following everything very closely, and he wanted us to be involved, and we were with Circle and Earth Spirit and Fellowship of Isis. I
Right.
think they were and there were lots of indigenous folks there too. But I heard a lot of stories about it. I wasn't there, so they're not my stories to tell. I did hear about the sacred concert that Mother Tongue gave and that Magnus McBride performed at. But I'm sorry I missed it, but sounds like it was great. And we've been involved in the parliament ever since, but also in many, the interfaith movement itself has kind of mushroomed since those years.
Yeah.
So now is the United Religious Initiative, URI, which is international, and NAIN, North American Interfaith Network, and then local interfaith networks all over the country. And I joined a group called the Marin Interfaith uh, Council. I can't remember when I joined. They were looking for a pagan though when I joined. Um, and I've been very active in that for, I don't know, 30 years maybe. And it's one of the first ones because it was founded in 1982 when there were big floods here. And one of the rabbis said, "Oh, these homeless people are encamped along the creek bed, along the side of the creek, and it's going to
Oh
flood."
gosh.
So, and it did flood. The streets, it was up above your knees in the streets
Mm,
in that particular year in San Anselmo. And anyway, this rabbi called some method, I think it was a Protestant minister friend of his. Anyway, they recruited a bunch of people, and that's how the Interfaith Center started council. And it was one of the first ones in the country, 82. So that's kind of cool.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it was totally Abrahamic when I joined, and it was very male. I was working on the Pagan Book of Living and Dying, and I went to, at the time, there was a bill before the legislature in California to allow physician assisted suicides, or whatever they call them these days. In the AIDS community, the term they have used is conscious self deliverance, which I think is
Mm,
a wonderful term and
hmm.
much more meaningful. But anyway, that I didn't know about it then. And I went with this woman named Megary Anderson, who was writing a book called Sacred Dying. And they didn't have death doulas and stuff like that in those days. And I don't know how I think she contacted me because they wanted to include something pagan in their book. And so they included the whole washing the body in the blessing, the fivefold blessing from the pagan
Uh-huh.
book, Living and Dying, is in this book, Sacred Dying. So we became friends and we went to a couple of other talks and presentations about death and dying. But at that one, we went together and there were these round tables and they'd given us some questions to talk to our table mates about. And we were at a table with, I think there was a Catholic priest, and the rest of them were hospice workers. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're angels.
Yes.
They're sacred
Yes.
beings. So anyway, we had to talk. And then they had a panel with 5 men. There was a priest, a Protestant minister, a rabbi, an imam, and a medical doctor who was Jewish. That was the panel. And the guy who invited me, who was a Catholic brother, originally invited me to join MIC. I said, that's pretty male, Kevin. Where are all the women? And it's entirely Abrahamic.
Right.
So I've been a different voice. We're full of other stuff now, Buddhists, and we have a couple Hindus and lots of different kinds of Buddhists, Quakers and
Yes.
Sufis, so it's more diverse now. Well, where I live is kind of ground zero for the new age.
Hmm.
County I live in, there's all kinds of retreats and stuff. But I was representing COG. Most of them represent a church and they have a lot of money. I just represent the covenant of the goddess. But I'm an active participant, so my face is visible. I mean, I do stuff and they know who I am. Um, and then since then, I've gotten involved in a few other interfaith things. But COG itself has been very involved in lots of interfaith, and there are national interfaith officers since 93 at least, Don Frew and Rowan Fairgrove originally, and then later Rachel Watcher and me, and now Andrea. And when we're called upon, we participate in interfaith activities. Often they're around, like the last one I went to was when ICE was killing everybody in Minneapolis. We had we had a kind of solidarity thing, and I taught a chant there, along me and all the Abrahamics. But but anyway, yeah, there was an LDS person, and there was a guy from the African American Presbyterian Church with a booming voice, a really one of those orators, that. really projects and talks with great passion. And I'm teaching this little chant, but but I think that that is beneficial to the world, our presence in interfaith. Even though, and I also think it's not even named properly, in my opinion. It's not really interfaith, it's interreligious,
Yes.
because a lot of us don't it's not a faith that we practice. It's religion, but it's not a faith. I go with the term anyway, just like I go with Wiccan in the prison ministry I do, but which I don't do for COG either. I would if they wanted to, but they haven't been that proactive about much lately. And there's been some, well, like I said, we Thorne was the only person who would take second officer when I was first, and she wanted
Yeah.
it in a casino. And the draw for that casino, their claim to fame, this is gross, is the Bonnie and Clyde death car.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
kid you not.
I'd forgotten that. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So you think COG has a purpose, at least as an interfaith organization, which
At the very least, yes. And I think it could be good for, I think there's a lot of good things that COG could do, but its structure, first of all, it needs to open up more to individuals. The demographic has changed. People aren't, you don't have to forego coven membership. The big concern about covens, especially back in the day, was you don't want anyone to know. We didn't even know who was a member except for the one person from the coven that was representative.
yeah.
There could be all kinds of other people in that coven, and they could be using whatever name they wanted. Even if they got credentials, they didn't have to use their mundane name. And people were really uptight about that. As I said, I never was uptight about that, but I respect if people have to do it. And there is a very small minority that is really, really hanging on to that with their last dying breath. Um, and I don't think that having an individual based on an individual membership precludes having coven members. I think you could still do that. But most people, even in covens, sometimes people that are in a coven are also a member of COG on their own.
Hmm.
They're a member already because they're in the coven, but they also want to be more participatory and they just join. And so I've been a what they call a solitary, what I call a floater, since the mid 80s, maybe late 80s. But I have met wonderful people. I think some local councils have been really thriving at different times.
We have so few now. There are,
We
what,
do
five or
have
six?
few. Well,
Yeah.
Northern Dawn, which was one of the oldest and one of the best, recently dissolved because they had formed in order to present open Sabbaths for the wider community. That was their raison d'etre. That was their mission. And now they don't have to because they're all over the place. They
Everybody does,
began a
yeah.
concept. So that's why they dissolved. It's because they didn't really have a purpose anymore. But they were one of the oldest. And that is what they did. And one of the things they did, this male coven I told you that wrote the statement of practice that Thorne didn't like, they gathered money and and I also have a picture of this that I sent to the history committee and sent to the website. The goddess is alive. Big billboards in Minneapolis. I mean, like standard billboards, the goddess is alive. They had two of them, I think. And there was an article in the local paper bound, which I have a copy of. So that was an active thing that was, a visible thing that didn't out anybody, just say
Mhm.
the goddess is alive. Sponsored by Northern Ireland Local Council, the Covenant of the Goddess. Right now, I'm very envious of Everglades Moon Local Council. They all love each other. They have a podcast. They do it. They have a festival. They do a ton of stuff together, and they're younger.
Mm.
We're in the Northern California Local Council, which is what I'm a member of. We call ourselves fondly the mother of all local councils because
Mm.
we were the first one. But we're a bunch of old farts. Sorry, but they're all, and we had, when we were trying to do some recruitment a couple of years ago, they said, each one of us bring a new person to the meeting. I wouldn't bring a young person to a meeting. They're cranky old people. We tried that, didn't work, that kind of defeatist, I don't know, but very invested in it and not, I don't think as Well, if I were a young witch and I were looking for something larger to affiliate with that represented a broader witching population, and I went to one of those, I wouldn't join. I mean, there's nothing. What is it? So what? You get credentials. And that was a big thing for a lot of people. Still is for some people. But I do think that fostering alliances, both with COG and with other organizations like Circle or Spirit, Reclaiming, whatever, is valuable. And I, I mean, I do have an emotional investment in it, I confess, but I get very disillusioned, saddened when I see people holding on to a rigid, this is the way we've always done it. That doesn't work. And it's off putting to new people. Who would want it? I mean, you're not really, it's not very welcoming, even if you say you are. So we're just limping along. I quit going to local council meetings. You only have to go once a year, so I do that. But, I think we should have a website. We do have a website, but it's pretty lame, extremely lame. And one of the things I thought was cool, it doesn't, this, it does make a difference. I know it sounds trivial, but it's not. The local councils had started to make their own logo,
Right.
incorporating the COG logo, because the earlier COG logo was kind of funky. And that COG logo we use now, which looks like it was drawn with a compass, which I'm sure it was, is very static. It has no dynamism to it at all, which I hate. But it can be dynamized, if you will, by embedding it in other stuff. So Everglades Moon has some kind of a tropical stuff around their local council. And there's, Chamisa local council had cacti and stuff. And, they're all different. So I wanted to do one I did one, but I didn't have the technical skills to do it as well as I wanted to for NCLC. And what I had was the COG logo. And then behind it, I had redwood trees just standing up behind. And then spilling across the lower part of the front was California poppies,
Yeah.
which totally softened it. And it was quite beautiful, I have to say. I couldn't I couldn't make it into a PG or PGF or whatever the hell. I couldn't make it into something like that to use. I have used it on some of my written printed material, but I haven't been able to use it to like share it with other people. So then they had a decided some people volunteered to do a website. They didn't know much about websites, but they were willing to learn. And it looks like they didn't know about websites, but didn't know basic design principles. And then they were going to make a COG logo, and they hired somebody to do it. I thought it was horrible. It was stupid looking. But anyway, when they got the website up, they had the local council logo and the COG logo on the screen. It looked like two nipples in the middle of the screen. It was just two little round things on a blank screen. That's not good design, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I sent him a bunch of stuff to put on it just to keep it, interesting. And it had been tried before Felicity tried it. So I think we need young blood. I would love to see younger people. I would be happy to mentor younger people if there were any that were interested and are interested in working with me. Like I said, I have that one young initiate. I don't seek them. I don't really have very many issues at all because it's not been my goal. And I'm really anti proselytization, which tends to sneak in. Just like, as I said, we parrot the overculture by using terms like clergy and reverend. I hate that. A lot of people in COG use it, and fine, but we're not reverends. And then there used to be an argument online when I first got online, when I was on AOL chats. They had people were talking about whether witches and or pagans should wear a collar.
No, gosh.
And if the collar, what color should it be? Should it
Hmm.
be green because we're earth religions? Or should it be purple because like we're real evolved? I said, why would you wear a collar? It's a freaking Catholic thing. Protestants don't even wear them.
Yeah.
It's not. Well, that what shows us that we're clergy. Come on.
Hmm.
I will say I have bent a little in the sense that I was presented with an honorary MDiv from Cherry Hill Seminary some years ago, and with it was a stole, those
Yeah, Stoles.
with Cherry
Stoles
Hill
work.
with a little Cherry Hill logo on it, and I wear the stole from time to time.
So,
Uh,
you have done things with COG, you've done things with reclaiming and with Cherry Hill. And so I was putting this as like the first time that we talk. And the next couple of times we talk, I want to go do Cherry Hill and do reclaiming. But
okay,
we've been talking for a long time
I
now. So
know.
I'm going to go ahead and, I'm so glad that
I mean, a lot of it could be thrown away, but
no,
the
no, 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 no. We're not gonna worry. We're not gonna work it that way. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording and then and finish doing our business. But thank you so much for
but just so
sharing
you
all of
know,
this.
I talk in Celtic, not work, and it always comes around to where it started, but it goes all kinds of other places as you've seen in this interview. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.